What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the J Area Podcast. I am your host, Jose Ramos Jr. And for those that have followed the podcast in recent weeks, you would know that I've been following a lot of sports and entertainment within this podcast. Now, that ranges from all sports, whether it's the NFL, the NBA, and so forth, and entertainment such as the film industry. I myself have always prided myself in being a fan of all aspects of media. In fact, that's why I took the communications class and majored in communications, because it's so broad. It covers so many different avenues and so many different topics that we can discuss together as fans of it, as consumers of it, and even those within the industry. Now, I know last week in our previous episode of the podcast, I had hinted at a new type of episode, a new type of genre and topic that I will be discussing. Now, me personally, anybody that has known me knows that I'm a big fan and supporter of pro wrestling. And with WWE SmackDown emanating from Glendale, Arizona this upcoming Friday, it's going to be at the Desert Diamond Arena. I will be attending that. I will be so fortunate enough to bring my family, my mother, my sister, and my brother to the event. We've been watching the sport for many years, for as long as I can remember. I can go back all the way to maybe the age of 2 or 3. And I know, as crazy as that sounds, I do have glimpses of my memory of watching guys like The Rock, seeing guys like The Undertaker, watching them battle it out over championships, over silly feuds. And I thought, what a great opportunity it would be to cover that on this episode of the J Area Podcast. Again, expanding our horizons and talking about new and different topics in order to elevate the conversation, as well as address some interesting points regarding the industry of pro wrestling. You see, the mainstream media has always kind of pointed at pro wrestling in this weird light. You know, a lot of people like to throw out the word fake. Is it fake? I mean, you could argue that. But I think the appropriate word to use would be choreographed, would be scripted, for sure. Not unlike any TV show or any movie that you and I were to watch on a daily basis. We know that these guys who are fighting on screen aren't really in a feud. They're not really fighting each other. They're not really at odds. It's a part of a story. It's a part of a narrative. That's what sells tickets. That's what gets eyeballs onto the product. And that's how pro wrestling has been able to be so successful and lasted so long. In fact, centuries even. This dates back to a long time ago. Pro wrestling it's not something new. It's not something that's been innovative within the last 20 years. Now, granted, it is, sustaining a huge boom period that we haven't seen the likes of in many decades. But it has been around. It has been present, especially in North America. In fact, if you were to go back in time and see the evolution of the sport of pro wrestling, you would see that two individuals would fight in a competitive battle to see who would either outwit or, basically outstrength their opponent for the amusement and the entertainment of a large audience. But over the course of time, people became smart enough to recognize that, hey, we can make money off of this. We can create a business. Not only can we make a living out of this, but we can also protect ourselves in the sense that they weren't actually hurting each other. They weren't actually aiming to hurt one another for the amusement of the audience. They were trying to create a narrative, create a story that would help everyone get invested in their fights, thus becoming what it is. If people had to develop this relationship with one another, this sense of trust between combatants, between wrestlers, thus holding each other accountable for their characters, for their speaking ability and ability to connect with the crowd, as well as the athleticism that it requires to partake in the sport of pro wrestling. This is when times that the terms like kayfabe were created. Kayfabe meaning the ability to maintain the illusion of the show, keeping that aura intact. You were trying to keep kayfabe alive by being your character outside of the show. You wanted to present this idea that I am my character is me. That would go into today's world. The only difference is social media. So you're able to create a character on television and also having to portray it online. The only thing is now it's kind of been a blurred line in between those because they've been able to implement a lot of their own personality. Some of the best character work, some of the best characters in modern wrestling history have been described as being themselves, portraying themselves, only cranking the knob up to an 11. They are a heightened and expanded version of themselves. You can look at guys like The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, John Cena. These are all guys who have described themselves as portraying an exaggerated version of who they are. But pro wrestling isn't just in the modern era. It's been expanded upon in the last century, the last 100 years. You go back in time to the territorial days when you had guys like Jim Crockett Promotions in Atlanta, you had the McMahons in New York, the Briscoes in Florida, you had the Von Erichs in Texas, even the Guerreros were in Texas, the Harts in Canada, all culminating in the world of wrestling that we know today. Now, during that time period, it was within the 70s and the 80s, there was a shift in wrestling. It wasn't your standard classic hold versus hold. It wasn't just a standard one-on-one match. Somewhere along the lines, and this can be derived from the idea of Vincent Kennedy McMahon Jr., who is popular for the WWE, for initiating the idea that we need to have interesting stories. We need to really hone in on those aspects that bring people out to see a match. Because it's one thing to see two people do battle, but it's the why. What are we fighting for? Why are these individuals fighting? Why am I investing my time? And why should I care? In doing so, Vince McMahon and the WWE, they helped create WrestleMania. And it wasn't just them by themselves. This was with the help of mainstream media. You see, the Rock and Wrestling connection in the 80s was the culmination of MTV and the WWE teaming up. You would see stars like Cyndi Lauper, Muhammad Ali, Liberace, different individuals from different industries, all lending their time, all lending their star power for the biggest event in wrestling history, WrestleMania. That took place in 1985, March of 1985, and now heading into this year, we're at WrestleMania 40. And for people who have vilified and hated on the sport for so long, it's amazing to see how bigger it's gotten. You look at an average crowd in any WWE event, and it's sold out. Now, granted, it wasn't always like that. It took time. It took effort. It took time for them to listen to the audience, recognize what they want, what they wanted to see. And it's all about that. It's all about that instant gratification. It's not like any other show we've ever seen or any other sport we've ever seen. Because in a sport, you don't necessarily take the audience's input in terms of who's going to win. When you see the Kansas City Chiefs face the San Francisco 49ers in the Super Bowl, you don't listen to the crowd to see who they're cheering for. You don't listen to that aspect and determine, okay, we're going to put this team over. If that was the case, the Niners would have won because that was a packed house of San Francisco fans. It's not like a television show. When you air it on TV, you don't get to hear that instant reaction of how they're feeling about the storyline or what they think about this guest star's appearance. You do in wrestling. It's unlike anything that's ever been seen. It's literally a rock concert meets the NFL meets a soap opera. It's everything combined into one. And I know for me personally, I caught the bug at a very young age. I can go back in my mind to a very young age. I was at the age of maybe 2 or 3. And I can remember watching individuals like The Rock and hearing the way he spoke, the way he taunted his opponents, the athleticism that he presented in the ring, accompanied with the aura that he had when he walked down the ramp and entered the ring. He just had this presence about him. He was everything that a young boy wanted to be. And that's what wrestling has really presented itself for me and a lot of other individuals growing up. For me personally, pro wrestling really got me out of a lot of dark times. And I feel like that's something that we all can bond over as wrestling fans. We all recognize that the beauty of pro wrestling is that it's able to connect us regardless of our religion, regardless of our backstory, our backgrounds, our financial backings, our family life. It doesn't matter who you are, what you believe in. Everyone can connect with someone on the roster. There's a story that will resonate with any one of you. And if there's anything that I can present you with this episode, or if there's anything that I hope you take away from it, is that the impact that pro wrestling has on many of us cannot be measured. I feel as if in this episode, I'm really addressing two different crowds. You either grew up a fan of pro wrestling or you didn't. And I'm hoping that with this episode, I can connect with many of the individuals who did grow up being a pro wrestling fan, because they can resonate with the emotion, with the investment that we have put in with this sport. And at the same time, I do hope I'm able to reach out to those who aren't fans of pro wrestling. And I'm not saying, try to convert them to become pro wrestling, but to keep an open mind and to see that, hey, there's a lot of interesting things out there, especially nowadays in pro wrestling. There's so many different outlets, so many different companies to follow, so many different individuals to support. And I think ultimately with the case of this podcast, it's just, like I said, always just connecting with people. And no matter what fashion and no matter what demographic or background, I feel like we all have our own stories that we want to tell. And for me personally, this sport does it. It does it all. There are so many people that I look forward to and look up to in the sense of who they are and how they present themselves. I already mentioned one, that was The Rock. And for more wrestling fans, to recognize other guys that have really influenced me, I've always said how much it's meant to me because of how it's helped me get through a lot of things. Life isn't perfect. We know that. We understand that. But no matter the circumstance and no matter what happens in our lives, we're never ready for certain events to take place. But if there's one thing I can always count on, it's turning the TV on and watching some of my favorite athletes and some of my favorite stories unfold before my very eyes. It's always been that for me. It's always been like a safe haven. I look forward to it. It's my escape from reality. And even though when the show concludes, I know I can always go back and rewatch old stuff, or I can always look forward to the new stuff that they're putting out. And I recently had this conversation with my family, but there's always been 4 individuals who really influenced me as a wrestling fan. And I feel like many people can identify with these 4 individuals because of their ability to connect with the audience and just overall their story. The first one that I ever really connected with was The Rock. And it wouldn't be until I was already grown at this age where I really recognized him for not only his accomplishments within the ring, but his accomplishments outside of it. You see, Dwayne The Rock Johnson comes from one of the more well-known families in pro wrestling history, the Anoa'i family, also known as the Bloodline for wrestling fans. And to see him having to come from this rich history of leaders, a rich history of successful individuals, and to attain the success that he has over the course of his life. He's a leader. He leads by example. He's a good person at the heart of it. I would like to believe that. And one quote that really has always stuck with me in one of his interviews was, he had said that it's nice to be important, but it's important to be nice. And that just really stuck with me because it doesn't take much to be nice to others. Again, regardless of the circumstance and regardless of the context, we should all treat each other with respect and dignity. And I firmly believe that. And learning from The Rock, again, in the sense of a pro wrestler and as a person, you see the way he conducts himself with his fans and his supporters and his family. He's always indebted to them. He's always treated them kindly. You would be, hard pressed to find someone who had a bad experience with The Rock. And then you look at his upbringing and how he aspired to be a football player. His dream was to be in the NFL. And unfortunately, that wasn't the path that was meant for him. He would sustain injuries, had to settle for the Canadian Football League, and it wouldn't pan out. And everyone who follows his story, they know that he had $7 to his name when he decided to drop his dream of football and jump into the family business of pro wrestling. $7 to his name. And in 6 years on the main roster, I should say, with the WWE, he's able to create a legacy unlike any other. He is up there in the upper echelon of the greats. In fact, he's so great, he's been able to exceed from the world of professional wrestling and become one of the biggest blockbuster action stars of our generation. Back then, people had Arnold Schwarzenegger. This era, we have Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He's definitely someone that I look to in terms of their work ethic, in terms of the way he handles his business, and in terms of the way he treats others. Another individual that I've always looked up to was Eddie Guerrero. Being that I grew up in a Hispanic household and we always had a rich heritage and a rich just love of our community and what we grew up in believing as a Hispanic household, Eddie Guerrero represented a lot of our ideals and who we wanted to be as people. And I can remember watching him. And again, I was very young. This was in maybe 2003 to 2004. So I was at the young age of, what would that be, 6 and 7, watching him having just great matches against the likes of Kurt Angle and Rey Mysterio, and really learning to respect his craft. This was when I was becoming more sentient of what work rate was and seeing how much of a ring general he was and how he was able to command the respect of his peers and the audience. He was a family man. And I can remember where I was in 2005 when I heard the news of his passing and watching every news outlet covering it and all the interviews that his fellow wrestlers were giving, just describing who he was as an individual and how this impacted them personally as well as the wrestling community and overall just the world in general. He's someone that we still talk about as wrestling fans. He's someone that we still admire, and we go back and we see his work and we realize just how great he was. I remember struggling with it because, again, I was at the age of 8 and not really coming to terms what death really was and what it meant. And to know that this is an individual that I had just seen, a couple days prior on TV, and he was no longer there, it was very shocking. And it's like we don't even know the guy personally. I never met him, But it's just that level of impact that he carried and how he influenced guys like me, women, children, everyone. His legacy still lives on to this day. As for another one, again, because I said I listed 4 when I talked to my family about it, was CM Punk. CM Punk definitely got me through my teenage years because he was someone who really voiced his opinion and expressed himself in ways that I wish that I could have when I was a teenager. He always represented the idealism of straight edge, meaning an individual who doesn't drink, smoke, or do drugs. He lived a clean lifestyle, which is something that I've always aspired to have. It's what inspired me to also follow in that footsteps and to see who he has become in terms of the lore of professional wrestling and how people have really flocked to support him even though he was gone for an extended amount of time in 7 years. Again, his legacy outweighs a lot of what he was able to produce in the ring. People recognize the story of who he was and who he is to this day. He just recently returned to the WWE back in November at the Survivor Series, and although he suffered a tricep injury at the Royal Rumble, we do expect him to be back within the next 4 to 6 months. And it's unfortunate he'll be missing WrestleMania 40, but I'm willing to bet anything that he's going to come back with a stronger mind, a stronger body, and hopefully be able to expand upon that already brewing story with Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre. And I keep mentioning story, and I bring that up because the 4th guy that has really resonated with me is Cody Rhodes. And I've been a fan of Cody Rhodes since 2007, when he had debuted defending the honor of his father, Dusty Rhodes, against Randy Orton. He would win the World Tag Team Champions with Hardcore Holly in 2007, ultimately hold onto those tag titles before joining up with Ted DiBiase Jr. and the Legacy group, along with Randy Orton, all the way to the Stardust gimmick, and then him leaving for the independent scene, joining Impact Wrestling, Ring of Honor, New Japan Pro Wrestling, until he would eventually create All Elite Wrestling alongside the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, and Tony Khan. All through that. And I just remember him and his relationship with his dad, Dusty Rhodes. Many people have a great admiration, a great level of respect and love for his father, Dusty Rhodes, for what he was able to pave for the industry and who he was as an individual, who he was as a teacher, as a mentor, as a friend. He was everything. And I'm glad that he was able to receive his flowers and receive all these praise and compliments while he was with us, because it was well deserved. And you see how Cody is, despite losing his father. He always speaks of him so highly. He's always uplifting him. He's always being in support of what his father, what he represented and who he was as an individual. And it is the story of Cody Rhodes returning to the WWE and becoming so consumed with achieving the one thing that his father never did, and that was win the WWE Championship. And although he did hold the title in his hands, he wasn't the actual champion. And it's up to him to be able to earn that title and bring it to the Rhodes family, something his father was never able to do, or his older brother was able to do. He wants to do it. He wants to fulfill that prophecy. And for those who have listened to the podcast and obviously know the correlation with that in my own personal life, a man's father is very vital to his development into who he wants to become as a man. And I can speak to that. The way he speaks about his father and the relationship that he had with his father, I resonate with in a lot of different ways. So I feel like that's why he, along with all these other individuals, have really resonated with me, because I'm able to take different aspects of their story, different aspects of their lives, and apply it to my own, and try to be the best version of myself that I can be, in hopes that maybe, just maybe, someone out there who's listening, they look at it and they think, you know what, I can resonate with what he's talking about. And that's always been the goal. Pro wrestling is much more than just a form of entertainment, a form of a sport. Like I said, it's an escape. It's a way for us to connect with other individuals and their lives in ways that we didn't think we could. And I've been fortunate enough to have attended several events. A lot of them have, in fact, all of them have been with my brother. He and I have always watched wrestling since we were younger. This will be the first event that we will be attending as a family, without my father. But I know he would enjoy it. He always had a good time watching it with us and going out and just being together and just watching the one thing that always connected us in different ways. One, because who doesn't love a good fight? I don't know why, but in human nature, we just love seeing each other fight one another and being competitive. But again, also relates to the story. We're very big in stories in this household, because why am I going to invest my emotion, my time, my energy, my money into something if I'm not invested in the players or the ones that are taking part in this story? So I look very much forward to going to SmackDown. It'll be the first time my mom and my sister have attended an event in a long time. I think, in fact, it's going to be the first time my sister has been to an event. It'll be the first time that my mom's been to an event since 2006, because we had attended Judgment Day when Rey Mysterio had defeated JBL in the main event. Also, I didn't even mention, but we were very fortunate enough to attend WrestleMania 26 when they came to it's the State Farm Stadium now, but at the time it was the University of Phoenix. We were able to see Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker. It was Shawn Michaels' last official match in the WWE. We got to see CM Punk versus Rey Mysterio. There was a Money in the Bank ladder match. Edge fought Chris Jericho. Batista fought John Cena. Bret Hart had his first match in nearly 13 years. A lot of memorable things on that pay-per-view event, and it really resonates with me and is a fun memory for me because I can remember just being so excited. I couldn't believe that my parents were able to, to get tickets to this event because it's WrestleMania. You're thinking it's like the Super Bowl of all events, and it would be difficult to find tickets. And we had really good seats. I thought we were able to watch the matches, just looking at the ring. We didn't actually have to, watch the Jumbotron. We could just look right down at the ring. And being someone like me who has very poor vision, that was a real plus to be able to watch just the ring and not the screens. And I can remember, my dad knew everybody. Like, he had connections with everybody. He somehow had known someone who worked at the stadium. They had worked together at his previous, place of employment. And he was able to, I don't remember how. Oh no, he gave us like bracelets. He gave us like these wristbands where we gained access to the floor. So if they were to stop us, we would show them this bracelet or this wristband, and they gave us the okay. So during the main event of Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker, we were on the floor to see them coming out of the curtain and entering the ring. If you've watched WrestleMania 26, if you own the DVD like I do, there's a point in that event you can see a 12-year-old version of me with my younger brother and my dad. You can see us walking past the ring. It's very brief. It's very short. Keep an eye out on YouTube and TikTok. I'll upload the video, but you can definitely see, he and I and our dad walking past the ring. In fact, to the point where I knew where the cameras would be located, and that only should tell you how much of a fan I am, where I'm able to identify when the hard cam is live. My dad and my brother are walking straight, and you can see me turn my head like straight to the camera. So I very much am proud of that. In fact, there's also an episode of Monday Night Raw back in 2018. I believe it was February 19th. You can see the three of us in our seats. It's very brief, and it's very small because it's a wide camera angle, so it's capturing like the whole section and not necessarily just our seats, but a whole section. But again, it's a blink and you miss it. You can definitely see us. So we're definitely on TV twice in terms of WWE television. So, hopefully we're able to be on TV again for Friday Night SmackDown. We did get really good seats this time around. We'll be in the section just right behind the ring. So the way the hard cam is positioned and it's filming the ring, that section directly behind, facing the camera, is a section we're going to be sitting in. The only difference is we're going to be on the upper levels near the entranceway of the the corridor, the walking areas. We're going to be near there. But if they were to cut to a wider shot, you'll definitely see us. So I'll definitely do my best to kind of stand out on camera, and then afterwards, when the show is recorded, I'm going to go back and see if I'm able to identify myself. So I'm really looking forward to that. On next week's episode, I will probably just give you an update of our time at Friday Night SmackDown, let you know how it went, our emotions. I'll probably be uploading videos of our time there, and I'm looking really forward to it. If you guys haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe the videos and the episodes on Spotify. Help this podcast grow. The goal for me personally is to get to 500 subscribers by the summer. I would absolutely love to get 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. That's the new goal, and it would mean so much to me if you guys would help me out, help the podcast out, and help it grow into something huge, something big that we all can enjoy. I'm definitely thinking about covering more professional wrestling just because I feel like it's an avenue in which is booming. Like I said, the business is booming when it comes to pro wrestling. So who would I be as a fan of pro wrestling to not be covering more sports content like that? The NBA, again, has been going on. The Warriors on a little bit of a hot streak, although they just dropped a game to the Denver Nuggets. So you can expect me to cover them. You can find me at JustJose_3 on platforms such as TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Again, Thanks you guys so much for listening to the podcast and supporting it. I look forward to next week's episode where, again, I'll be updating you on our time at Friday Night SmackDown. And again, thank you guys for the J Area Podcast. We will see you next week.